Author is funded by the Pacific Northwest Writers Association, supporting writers from pen to publication since 1955. To learn more about the PNWA and their yearly conference, please go to pnwa.org.
Hello, this is Brian Mercer for Author Magazine. Today I'm here with William Kenower, author of Write Within Yourself, an Author's Companion, and editor-in-chief of Author Magazine.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
Over the years, you have interviewed hundreds of authors for Author Magazine. And I think in that time, you must have come up with a formula or seen a pattern of success and something that authors, the successful authors do. And I was wondering if you could speak to that at all.
Sort of the pattern for successful authors.
Right. You've interviewed enough authors and you see all the good ones do this.
One of the patterns is that there is no pattern, in that there is no one way to do it. You know, I've spoken to people who've done it through independent presses, through small presses, through major presses. I've spoken to people who've hit it on the first book they ever wrote, who had publishing contracts before they finished their first book. And I've spoken to people who took 13 books to find their first, publishing contract. So there's really no one route, but one consistent theme throughout all the careers of the writers I've met who are flourishing in their career is that they write what they're curious about and they write what they're passionate about. In fact, I would say that one of the differences between the professional writer, the writer this is what they do, however much money they make at or however many books they sold, but this is really what they do. And the writer who's, I don't even like to use the word amateur, but still at the beginning of their journey, is that the professional writer knows that because they are curious about something, it is worthy of their full attention. That just that, the fact that they're interested, means they should give that subject their full attention. Whereas I think a lot of people, and I encounter this a lot in my teaching, when I'm lecturing or working with individual students or classes, that there is a mistrust of the writer's curiosity because it seems so private and such a small thing. And how do they know just because they're interested that other people will be interested in it as well? I remember I got to know the writer David Laskin. He told me about his first book. He's a nonfiction writer. And the first book he ever wrote was, and in fact I was talking to him about this subject. And I said, do you think that's true? Because this was something I'd stumbled upon over the last year and a half or so. He said, oh, absolutely. I absolutely think that's true. I said, what was your first book? He said it was about the history of the weather in America. And I said, okay, that sounds really boring to me.
Right.
He said, are you kidding? The history, and he then proceeded to tell me how cool weather is, how you can see the rain coming over the mountains, and isn't it nice to know when it's going to be snowing, it's going to be hot. And he got so animated talking about how awesome the weather is, and I still wasn't convinced for me, because I'm still not that interested. I am not that interested in the weather, but he is, and he was able to write that book, and he was able to get it published but if he had come to me and said, should I write this book, a book about the weather, and I had just consulted my own curiosity, I would have said, well, no, I don't like it. I can't imagine anybody else would
like it, right?
And so that is a great example, I think, of an author saying, I'm really interested in the weather. Let me see if I can write a book that can convey to somebody else what I can see within my own imagination, and see if I can convey that onto the page so that other people can share in what I am curious and interested in. And I think that is the one consistent quality that all the writers have. They trust what they're deeply interested in, and that's enough for them to follow.
So I'm thinking about my own journey as a writer and trying to come up with like the formula. You struggle for years and you start to get a little bit of success. And the back of my mind, I'm always thinking, well, if I just try a little harder, if I just put more effort into it.
Exactly the opposite. Writing is meant to be effortless. Writing is meant to be effortless. Now think about this, when you're writing along, in fact, I would say my writing is a search for effortlessness. Now, that doesn't mean that it is just I sit down, open the screen, and it just whoosh, like the river flowing. Quite the contrary. In fact, if I write for 2 hours, I often spend the first hour writing a paragraph, and the second hour writing, say, 3 pages. But I know I found the right word or the right sentence or the right story, but let's just stay on the micro. I found the right word, the right sentence, the right scene because it fits in effortlessly. How do you know if you found the right word? It is like a piece fitting into a jigsaw puzzle. There's no resistance to it. And so I'm always seeking the most effortless path in my work. What's the story that's the easiest for me to tell? The one that's most interesting to me. What is the right sentence? The one that fits in the most effortlessly, and not one I have to force in, but one that just flows from one thought to the next.
Right.
And so I understand the desire to work harder because you want something more from your writing experience, but what you're looking for is greater ease. You're looking for a greater focus of attention. That's different than working hard. Working hard is working against something. You're seeking the most effortless path. It has to be. It has to be the one that is in flow with the thought that you're trying to share, whether that thought is a story or an essay or poem. And so I would replace the thought of I need to work harder to I want to work with even greater focus. I would love to spend even less time worrying about whether this story is any good or not, and even more time focusing on, is this what I most want to say? I think working hard, again, assumes you're working against something, and your story should be moving against nothing. There should be nothing obstructing it. It should be an effortless flow of thought.
How does confidence relate to that ease, that flow that you were talking about?
Well, a writer's confidence is really their expression of their awareness of their unconditional, I'll say, well-being, by which I mean this. Their ability to focus on that awareness within themselves, that their well-being, that their value, that their curiosity, that their lovability, that their talent, their charm is not based on any external conditions. They need no proof for it. How does that relate to writers? For the writer, for the author, the conditions are always what other people think of it. How many people have bought your book, what your writing group thinks of it, what your agent thinks of it, what your editor thinks of it, how many rejection letters or acceptance letters, all the external response to the story you've written, which will come.
Right.
It's going to come.
You show it to people.
Sure. You show it to somebody as soon as you happen. That's why I say an author is someone who's shown one thing to one person. You've now experienced that. Because now you're having to write without the awareness of those other people, without trying to please them or worry about what they're going to think. So the writer's confidence comes from writing without any thoughts to what other people will think of it.
Right.
Only because the story you're writing, where is it, Brian? Where's the story you're writing before you've written it?
It's somewhere in the ether, I don't know.
But it's in you.
It's in me, yeah, true.
Although it's not like your anatomy,
right.
But it's in you. Only you can see it.
Right.
So how can anybody help you write it? They can tell you what they see. You could try to write a tragedy and they could be laughing their ass off, and you could say, oh, well, maybe I didn't write what I wanted to write, but I like the comedy, so let's keep that.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. But it's in you, and so the only way to have confidence is to write without any thoughts to what anybody else thinks about it, which is very challenging because in order for your work to, quote, succeed, it seems it's dependent wholly on what other people, it seems to be dependent wholly on what other people think of it. People have to like it and they have to buy it. An agent perhaps has to like it so they can sell it. An editor has to like it. A publisher has to. All these people have to like it for it to succeed. And yet the only way to write those things that people will light up for other people and will be bought and spread around and shared is to forget about those people and focus on where those ideas are, which are within you, where no one else can see, because no one else can see them, so that you can bring them forth so they can share them. The gold, literally, the value is in you. And your job is to forget about them, go in, let it come out, see if what you've written is as cool as what you imagined, and then say, here you go. And so there is a forgetting about them is the only route to actually, strangely, pleasing them.
You talked a little bit earlier on that you've interviewed a lot of authors, some of them who have done 13 books and before they found their voice and had it published. Others, they had a book contract even before they had finished. And I'm wondering, what part does luck, just blind luck, play in this process?
I don't believe in luck.
Okay.
I don't believe in luck. Let's look at a die roll.
Okay.
If anything's luck, it's a die roll.
Sure.
It's not. The die does not react randomly. The die responds exactly to Newtonian physics.
Sure.
Once the die is cast, right, it's going to respond to the velocity from which it was thrown,
Right.
to the
Obstacles.
to the obstacles, to all the different environmental factors. But it's not random. The beauty of the physical world is there isn't any randomness in that way. The sun, it goes up and down. Gravity is predictable. The one unknown factor in the die is the one throwing it. The person who doesn't understand the effects of what they're doing. In other words, the die is not random, but we don't have the power to predict what's going to happen.
Right.
Learning to take luck out is learning to understand how this process, whatever you're doing, works. And I would say, if you want to take luck out of it, pay attention to how you feel. Forget about results and pay attention to how you're feeling. Forget about what you think is going to happen. I've looked back at my life, Brian, and I've realized my entire life was trying to get me here. And the only one not cooperating was me. No lie. Everything in my life has been trying to push me towards this. And I was the one saying, no, I've got my idea of how my life's got to be led, and I'm going to lead that. My life was saying, okay, but we're going to keep nudging you, and all those rejection letters, those are trying to get you to write something else, life said to me. Sure. No. No, yes, I said. Until I finally said, forget it, and I'm going to write this other thing instead. And so if I had simply paid attention to how I felt and say, does this feel right? Does that not feel right? I don't know where it's going, but it feels right to go this way, and just trusted that, that begins to take what we call luck out of it. Now, when things come to you, it makes perfect sense. You couldn't have predicted what the exact materialization would be, but it would line up perfectly with whatever you were feeling. And the more you pay attention to what you're feeling, the more you are guided towards the things that you want. Every time I take my eyes off results, I get better results. And I put my attention on what I'm feeling. If I'm writing, I'm thinking word by word by word by word, paying attention to how each word feels, and then we see where. But if I'm thinking, when will it sell and who will like it?
Right.
Now I'm not paying attention to one word. And what is the difference between your life and every little step you take and every little thought you think and every little choice you make and those stories you write? Just word, choice. It's all the same thing. Get your eyes off those results and what we call luck. I don't believe in it. Right. I just don't believe in it.
If you're going to offer someone out there who is struggling and wants to find the passion in their work, what would you do? What advice would you give them?
Well, I would say, first of all, get your eyes off of what you want to become of the work, and get your attention on the thing that is most interesting to you right now, regardless of whether you can see how anybody else would be interested in it. So if you want to write a book about Kung Fu pirates, and you can't imagine another human being on earth wanting to read a book about Kung Fu pirates, start writing a book about Kung Fu pirates. It might become an historical novel about the first president of the United States. It might become that. But if what's drawing your attention, what's really got your attention is Kung Fu pirates, then follow it. Follow whatever lights up in front of you right now. And don't question why it's interesting to you. Don't think about where it's going. It's not your job to know where it's going. When I coach individuals, I work with individual clients, often it's one of their first books they've ever written. And often one of the most daunting aspects of it is thinking they have to know everything about that book. But they don't. They don't have to know every word ahead of time. They don't have to know ahead of time how it's all going to be laid out. What they have to know is that they're really interested in it. That they're really interested in writing about, say, the difference between feeling alone and feeling in love, or the difference between grieving the death of your wife and finding love again, or the difference between being afraid and feeling safe. Find that thing that looks so interesting to you, or that character that you so want to write about it, and just allow that to be enough. Because it is enough. See, the writer who's thriving and publishing, that's where they start too. But they have learned that that little impulse will lead to that. They've been taught that by their own experience, but they always begin there. That's where we begin. So let that one little impulse however quiet, however small, however private, let that be enough, because it really is. That's what begins every journey.